Hello everyone, this is Apex, and you're watching the #1 Zaiwu hater in the world.
This episode of Thorin Starts, like many videos on my channel, brought to you by What Delicious Energy Formula, Gamer Sups of course, the classic. This is strawberry lemonade, quite a pleasant flavour. You can guess what it tastes like. Do you know what strawberry tastes like? Do you know what lemonade tastes like? By the way, there are two flavours called strawberry. I think it's called strawberry burst and one called lemonade. Tastes like that combined. It's quite good. By the way, little pro tip, you can also buy different flavours of Gamer Subs and combine them. I've made little sort of cocktails out of different flavours that I think go well together. You can get 10% off everything on the Gamer Subs store, including Gamer Subs formula itself, sugar-free. You can have the caffeine-free one, the AFK sleep blend, waifu cups, those shaker ones where the tits go whatever fucking colour and the bikini goes whatever colour. You can obviously get the Gamer tees. They've got apparel on there. And don't worry, I will inform you in the future when they have special sales on, and then you can potentially save even more. The new look Team Vitality has won IEM Katowice, the first prestige event of 2025, and the 5th overall of CS, because obviously we had the two majors last year, then we had Katowice and Cologne. We didn't have one to end 2023 because CS2 had only just come out. By the way, if there'd actually been a major to end CS 2023, I actually think Simple probably never retires or goes into this inactive period of his career. There had already been a win of a prestige event by the core of this team, because obviously 4 of them, everyone except Spinks, had won Cologne last year in what was probably, by the way, the best final of the year. It actually was better, by the way, than the PGL Shanghai Major final. It's just the Shanghai Major final was really exciting. But actually, that was one of the best matches ever. That was easily the best CS2 match ever, the Cologne final for me. Expectations for this team, I think, were the interesting place we should start, because I actually did get very hyped when I saw this off-season move. I'm a big fan of Spinks. I think he's very underrated as a fragger. And you can just see by the way fans talk about him, they just didn't watch him play CS2, or they're clueless about roles. Like, they keep talking like he's the guy from like CS2 who's like mega passive on T-side and never takes any fights. Like, that isn't who he was at all. Like, he was happily taking tons of duels T-side. It's one of the reasons why their T-side was actually demonic. He was really sick. So I thought when you had Rops, look, Rox hadn't been as good for the last few months towards the end until the major, basically. But you're going to lose a bit of fragging. I think the raw mechanics of Spinks are better. But you will actually gain a better clutch player. And most importantly, that also implies a better closer. And actually, one thing I did think they needed in this team, and a bizarre thing that actually Spinks, as someone who's played a lurky style, didn't really have to his game, was he wasn't that insane in 1vx, in 1v1s, in 1v2s, and 1v3s. Whereas Rops is probably the best 1vx player of like the last 5 years or something. Who else can win like an impossible 1v3 or impossible 1v4? This is your guy, right? So to me, I actually thought, you've already got Ziwu giving you loads of firepower. You already were one of the highest firepower teams anyway. Flames is going to be streaky, but give you massive numbers. Mezzi's going to raise the floor. Apex, actually, for Nigel, has always been actually a pretty good fragger, I think, and certainly puts himself in positions to sometimes have the resources to frag. So when you've got players of that caliber, I don't think you actually necessarily need more firepower. I actually think this rounds out the squad better. But you obviously had to figure out, like, how is Rops going to work with Apex's calling style? How are they all going to fit together personality-wise, etc.? Like, you can say Spinks was an arsehole, or he was the problem. Maybe the rest of them are super chill, though. Maybe it's just Apex being the one putting a fire under people's arse. So Rops can be a little bit inscrutable in that sense, but I do think of him as someone who's got a very set style of play that he's mastered somewhat. He's one of the best lurkers ever. And you just have to essentially connect that to your overall plan. I don't think he comms as much as people imagine he probably does, but I think you just can trust him once he gets the feel of the round, and then you do the rest of the round. So I actually do expect he's going to help them win a lot more close matches and actually more trophies. So personally, I did think this could be the team of the year. Like, I looked at it. You can't write Na'Vi off completely, but I did always think they were walking on water, just winning without a superstar player. G2, I think, fucked their lineup up in the offseason. I don't even think he'll win any titles. FaZe Clan, I mean, you never quite know. Obviously, it looked pretty good so far, but Liege didn't have the best tournament. He actually had a pretty poor tournament, actually. And they just lost their closer themselves. You think who else even is there? Spirit's really good, but I actually think that the Magic's performance in the final was fool's gold, as you saw in this final. So you look across the scene, Mouse obviously has just wrecked themselves. All of a sudden, it's just sort of Spirit out in front, maybe Na'Vi's in the mix. And then for me, it's when does Vitality come online? Because at the Blast Bounty, they were fucking underwhelming. I mean, Ziwu just straight up struggled on that first map. They looked disconnected as a squad. They didn't even look happy on the flare cams. And they lost to Eternal Fire, who, yes, is a very hot team right now, probably the best Dark Horse team in the world. They're a very skilled team. But at the same time, like, bro, go man for man. Like, you're supposed to cook those guys. You're supposed to win like one map dominant fashion, they win a close one, then you win an OT or like a 13-10 game. You're just getting 2-zipped by them. Nah. So to me, luckily, that tournament began online, then only had a couple of LAN games. And so at that point in time, okay, not the end of the world. You come to Katowice, you should be one of the favourites to win the event. You should be an absolutely fantastic team. And as you'll see, they were. So in the group stage, they started out with the fellow Frenchies of 3D Max. Very close Inferno game. It's always been an up and down map for them to call the T-side of that. Quite frankly, dominant nuke game here. No problems whatsoever there. Then you go to the phase one. This was a banger. Probably the series of the tournament, my money. Like, look, Vitality smashed on Nuke, where they've gotten really strong again. Anubis, where actually they've just been good for the last 6 months for me. FaZe managed to pull that out. That's a big time win for FaZe. And then the last one was the mega overtime, super duper Dust 2 extravaganza. Great game. Just that at the end of the day, Vitality pulled it out. Now, what's funny is this is reminiscent, if you remember at Cologne, of a very similar series. I think at the exact same portion of the group stage, where again, it was actually a Dust 2 decider for that one too. And that was where basically FaZe almost had them in 3 maps there. So very teasing for FaZe, but obviously FaZe went out to Eternal Fire later on and lost that giga overtime game where Elise kind of played like shit overall. So that was the series of the tournament for me. And since FaZe didn't make the playoffs, actually that left the playoffs fairly open for Vitality, but we'll get to that in a minute. Then you add in the decider, so you're already guaranteed to make the playoffs. You have the game against VP. Now, if you look up here, look, on paper, you're supposed to believe G2 could win this group, but can they fuck? Then VP actually upset Eternal Fire and kind of were one of the revelations of the tournament. Got all the way to here and then just got murked completely. This was not actually a very good series at all. And this was a VP that was looking pretty hot. Like all the players were starting to fit their roles. They were looking spicy on all the sides. The fragging was there. Flip was on fire. Icy was playing well on T-side. You had everything you wanted. So this was a statement win for me. And then you go to the playoffs. In the playoffs, obviously you skip into the semis, right? This is glorious. First of all, look at the draw that you've gotten. You have no tournament favourite on your side of the bracket. You have the winner of Mongols and Eternal Fire. If you don't know, right, Eternal Fire has yet to ever do anything on a massive stage. Mongols doesn't do anything on massive stages either. It's looking overall like maybe the better overall team, but the firepower's better on Eternal Fire. And by the way, neither team's great on stage. And Senzu had a fucked wrist. He was, in theory, their best player. So it didn't matter who won that one. For me, Vitality all day was going to the finals. The other side of the bracket, meanwhile, was like VP, who admittedly didn't have flavors. He had to go home because of his visa. So they were somewhat crippled. But then you had Spirit, the de facto number one team in the world. And then in the semis, they're playing Na'Vi. And by the way, being as I think Vitality always had a great matchup into Na'Vi, you even had a good chance you could get Na'Vi in the BO5 final where they're not good in BO5s. And they're the team that you've already seen beat Spirit very narrowly in the group stage. This could have been a Spirit 2-0. It could have been a Spirit 2-1, but it ended up being, could also be Na'Vi 2-0, but it ended up being a banger series where Na'Vi pulled it out. Actually was looking for all the world until they fucked up like a T rush onto upper against Pistols. Like Spirit was actually going to close this one out in 3. So you look at that. Already these teams have bled maps. They've looked mortal. Meanwhile, look at Vitality. After they just clap Mongols, who looked scared, by the way, and they have one of the best players is injured. I would wait for next tournaments to see them make a final or win a big series. You got to the final. You've only lost one map in the whole tournament. You lost that one map, 13-10 on Anubis to FaZe. Yeah, you've had close maps, but you haven't lost one. So you go to the final. If people don't know, I absolutely took Vitality for this one. Not like they're the favourite, but I thought, if you're going to get them as an underdog, you got to. How can you not take them? So the problem I always have with Spirit is, I actually think Spirit's going to have a similar problem Na'Vi had, except the difference is, Na'Vi's team play and tactics couldn't overwhelm more skilled teams in BO5s. And for Spirit, the problem is, I actually don't think they can go deep enough, one, in the map pool, and two, you're just asking too much of Donk. I mean, Donk and Shiro played like shit in this final, but you're just asking too much. Like, to be the best player basically in the server, probably even by a little margin, for 3 out of 5 maps, that's just asking too much. That's just asking too much for me. Also, in the final, I actually do think Zero was fucking cracked in this one. Spurs 2 maps, I mean, basically just put them away. Like, it was just over already. Yes, if they'd won the 3rd map, maybe Train would have been exciting. Who the fuck knows what would happen to that in the grand final. Donk and Shiro were both underwhelming, especially relative to their level. Donk did what he could on the 2nd map of Nuke, but that was just one man performing on his own and no one else doing fucking anything. By the way, much like I pointed out at the major in the semi-final where Mouse played against Spirit, and on Nuke there in the opener, they actually somewhat looked like they isolated and limited Donk a little bit. Like on CT side, they would double peek him. They would like have a bunch of nades come in at the same time, use utility to push him around. It looked like they had ways of actually isolating Donk at times in this series, but he is still Donk, so you can't keep him down entirely. And yeah, as I said, they only lost one map in the whole tournament. It was the 13-10, and on Anubis of all maps. Like, not exactly a map people are like all rushing to play right now. So the problem is this. I do still think on paper, Vitality can absolutely be the best team in the world. They can be the number one team. The problem becomes this. If you go and look at the team, this is actually at this tournament, by the way. You can't see it at the top, but even though it says all time, this is just for the IEM Katowice here. If you go here, right, first of all, that number is fucking impossible. So this is actually one of the like highest fragging performances ever at like a prestige event. That's unbelievable. Rop's also bonkers numbers for both sides here. Flames is supposed to be way streaky. He is in terms of KD, but he obviously had crazy impacts, so the rating's high. Apex actually as an IGL's fragged pretty well there. You only end up -1 for the whole event after 12 maps. And then Mezzi, just as usual, puts his hard hat on, just goes to work, doesn't complain, does his job, and what do you know, you win the tournament. The problem becomes when you look at other factors. Like, first of all, this is inhuman T-side. You can't do this again. Look at that. You cannot do this. It just won't happen. It's just absurd. That you just won't have T-sides like this. You could be the best T-side team in the world, but you were absolutely smurfing at this tournament. And then if I show you here, Flames, you rely a lot on him. Look at the amount of attempts and look at the success rate. That's impossible. Like, the reason why people like Xantares could do that in the past, or Elige, is because they go out the tournament earlier. These guys went all the way to the tournament and won. Like, that's just too high. That's not going to maintain. It's just not plausible. In fact, everyone look on T-side. It's ridiculous. Their T-sides probably are the best in the world, but holy fuck, was this also walking on water. And then if you go to the map pool, this is where I am very excited for them, because they already had a great map pool last year that they rotated around as the other teams changed and as they wanted to fuck around with second vetoes. But this is just fucking insane. Because think about it, they're probably the best nuke team. Dust 2, they're insane on and they love it. Mirage, they've just smurfed on. It's probably Ziwu's best map of all time. It's always been a great ROPS map too. Inferno, that's a little bit more streaky on how it's called T-side because you don't have as much AWPing. And then Anubis, the one they lost was the one to FaZe, and they beat VP on this. And if you go back to online, they've just lost to fucking Eternal Fire, who's probably the best specialist team on that map in the world. That's their new Vertigo, as it were. So I do think some of this is a little bit overinflated. You're not going to get this every tournament. But I do think it's totally reasonable to imagine this can be the best team in the world. Ziwu smurfed at the whole tournament. By the way, it's between him and Donk right now who the best player in the world is. Like, you could certainly still say it's Donk. I think he has less help and certainly less experienced help. But Modesty, if you don't know, has dropped off the last 2 to 3 months at this point in time. He's just actually been kind of a bit mad. That's why I had my hot take on Hot Take Point made about where I have him ranked in the world. Rops has been sick in this LAN, but obviously I don't expect those numbers to be maintainable. I expect him to drop down to like a 1.15 and have tournaments where he has a map that's off or he doesn't always get his clutch off, etc. He can still be very good though. The key thing there is you don't need like a second star because you've got Rops and Flames, haven't you? Flames was big time, like I say. By the way, similar for CT openers, totally impossible number. I think his CT openers was like 60% win rate or something. It's like, that's not going to happen again. I mean, he's obviously a mega high fee CT player, isn't he? So that, if he's basically peeking out and fucking around on CT set and always getting the opening kill, that just isn't going to happen over and over again. And by the way, that's where actually other teams will start to punish you when you're on CT side, especially because your T sides are too good. And since everyone fragged, the T sides were just a little bit inflated. But I do think they got the best. By the way, interesting detail, as he pointed out, Apex had actually never won a series in the Spore deck in his entire career. Sounds impossible, right? You think, come on, mate. Spore deck, they've been doing that since 2014. Well, let's go and have a look quickly. And by the way, it's going to be mad, because think about who he's playing with. He plays with like Kenny S and Shocks and fucking Ziwu. He's had like the greatest French players of all time. So we'll just go and look at the Katowices and show you why. But it is actually amazing, not only how bad things have gone for Apex, but Ziwu similarly. He's been in the team the whole time with Apex, right? Since he joined. So it's actually unbelievable how poor they've been at Katowice out of all the prestige. It's why when I keep telling people, like, you know, Ziwu's had problems at prestige event. No, he hasn't. Look at this number. That is still a good number. It's like, yeah, it's worse than his other numbers though, isn't it? Genius. So you go to the first one, EMS1 Katowice. Interesting detail. If you enjoyed watching Steel on camera, he got to work on the desk at this event because I didn't work the event, did I? For reasons everyone knows. So what happened at this tournament was he was on LDLC, where he had Kaylee, Maniac, Uzi, Happy. This was basically a team that was based around like Apex and Happy with the stars. Then Maniac was pretty good at the time. Kaylee was like sort of a star, but let's just say I think he had assistance. This was the one where you got out the group stage. You had a pretty easy group, to be fair. And then the problem is you got rolled by VP instantly. So nothing you could do there. Then you go to Katowice 2015. It's obviously the one that was another major, and this was won by Fnatic. You go to... He's going to be on Titan, and you might remember this is the infamous one where they actually blew it in the group stage, even though Kenny S was in God mode. This is the one where they almost beat Envy, and then they got banged out inexplicably by Titan, and they were out of the tournament. Then you go to the 2016 one, was the one where Fnatic was winning. This was the one where they won those 6 tournaments in a row, if you remember. So he's obviously on Envious, which were the reigning major champions, but the problem is they bombed their group where they got upset by a whole bunch of teams. Like, this is actually the easier group in theory. So they fucked that one up. Then you go, they didn't even qualify online in this one. In 2017, he is on the G2 Super Team, and they didn't qualify through the online qualifier. They lost to Fnatic, and then Heroic. You might remember this is the one where Heroic actually got out the group stage and went to the semis. Then you had the one that was won by Fnatic, famously with Flusher going ham over FaZe Clan. So obviously, he's going to be on G2 again. G2 Super Team. And this is the one where they lose to Fnatic, who wins the event, close series. And then they lose to NIP inexplicably. And this was not the good NIP. It could have been 2-0, but this was not the good NIP. Like, look at this NIP here. This was the Drake and Rez Dennis one. You probably don't even remember that existed. Then you go to 2019. This was the one where it was a major and they just actually lost to NIP in the last match in the 3-2 game. They lost to Renegades, Kassad's team. Yeah, that's right, with Jacob. Not with Naf, with Jacob. They lost to Navi, Simple's team, and then they lost to NIP in 3 maps. So that's actually a pretty underwhelming one, by the way. Then you have the 2021 that had no crowd for the actual arena. That was the one where we're on Vitality at this point in time, by the way. You lose to Astralis, who probably the best team in the world at the time, pretty close series. Then you get beaten by FaZe Clan. Now, this is pathetic. This is the FaZe Clan with Cold Zero and fucking Nico. It's not even like the one with like an all-time great IGL. So kind of underwhelming for me there. Then you go to Back on Land 2022. This was a mega underwhelming one. Like, sure, this is where you just brought Dupree and Mega Skin. He still had Masuta. And you were figuring it out with Zonic. But if you go and look down here. So you barely beat Mouse with Dexter. You lost to Heroic, who obviously went on to be very good and was admittedly a better team. No, they weren't a better team because Vitality had been excellent the year before. And obviously you'd made this big blockbuster move. It's close. And then here's where it gets embarrassing. You lose to Gambit. Gambit's still like establishing themselves as a LAN team at this point in time. So some of these are pretty underwhelming, I've got to say, for Zewu and for Apex. Obviously, he was only the IGL from the 2022 one onwards in terms of the years I'm counting here. Let's have a look. This is when Spinks is in the team, obviously, last year. This is a really underwhelming one too, because they won the Rio and the Major not so long after this. This was the one where beat NIP, beat Fnatic. Fnatic wasn't particularly good at this point in time. Lost to Heroic. Heroic was very good at this point in time, admittedly. That got you to the playoffs, and then the playoffs, you lost to fucking Team Liquid. And by the way, that's the Team Liquid that still had Elysian. People forget this one. This is when Team Liquid actually had like a little heater towards the end of the year. Like, look at this. And then obviously, last year's, you again underwhelmed. Because this is the one where you lose to Ents. Now, remember, that's the Polish Ents with Glaive. And you're getting clapped on 2 of the maps. Then in the lower bracket, you instantly lose to Heroic. Now again, that's the Heroic that's gotten like fucking Nerds and like Nikados. Doesn't even have Dexter yet. Yeah, it's super close, but what the fuck's going on? So I think these are some clown-ass results. Like, these were embarrassing, but whatever. They've won now, and that's what's important. So Apex finally gets his win in the Sport deck. Zewu now has won all of the prestige tournaments. He has won the Major. He was the MVP of that. He's won Katowice, Obviously, this year, MVP of that. He won Cologne last year, and he was the MVP of that. Now, we'll say they're going to go, he's just equaled the record of MVPs. Yeah, that's bullshit because it includes online MVPs. And by definition, we obviously don't include online tournaments when we're talking about LAN accomplishments. And when you say MVP, you don't just mean MVP of a LAN, you mean of a meaningful LAN. So it's a totally disingenuous argument. And I'll do a future video on that because guess what? People like Device and Simple need to take theirs away too. And by the way, I don't give a fuck if you won one from like Heroic or Big. Get the fuck out of my face. Obviously, that means you could say he was won the career Grand Slam. These are all the big tournaments he can win. By the way, Simple's also done that, but there's an asterisk. His 2020 Katowice didn't have a crowd for the playoffs. He did remember win Cologne in 2018 over Astralis in the semis and then beat Big Clan in the final. But even he is actually gangster. So unlike all these losers going, oh, online counts, you're just hating because Zewa was owning. Doesn't matter who you beat. Zewa won a major. No, it matters who you beat. It matters what the conditions are. So Simple's such a gangster. If you go listen to my interview with him, he basically just admits he doesn't even count the 2021 because the 2021 Cologne, that is, because it wasn't played in the Lanxess with a crowd. It's just like a fucking studio land, wasn't it? So when people say, though, that he has completed CS, that's just stupid. You're just being stupid now and abusing language. Completed would mean you've done 100%. It's complete. There's nothing more you can do. You can certainly win more fucking tournaments, can't you? How did Dupree win 5 majors if he'd already completed the game? What was he doing at that point? Exactly. If someone was to say, oh, I have 90% completed a game, you wouldn't go, oh, so you're at the end of it and you've done everything. No, you'd go, all right, you've done 90% of it. So just people are just using that thing where they're just stupid to a language again to make someone look better than they are. Funny how that works. Now, going forwards, this is a big deal because I do think Vitality can absolutely be the team of the year. I think Zewu can be the player of the year. I actually think Spirit are going to have a harder time overall having the same aggregate wins of tournaments, etc., especially as some of the other teams come online. I think Zewu and Rops can be the best combo in the world. They probably are already, although it's only been a few months. I do think Spirit will be way better than they were in that final. Apex, by the way, is just an underrated IGL. He's been fantastic on T-side for years at this point in time, and with varying different types of pieces and players as well. And then I also think Flames and Mezzi, within the context of their roles, which can't typically super frag, are actually just very good role players. I think the floor on this team is crazy. I think it's really, really good. I'm not a big fan of the coach, but tell you what, maybe it's not a big deal if the players can play at this and synergize together. So yeah, Vitality won IEM Katowice 2025. They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back. And supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, The Concept, Animosity, Banediesel, Ben Glass, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it, always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.